Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Rachael Conway, the Supporting Science Officer for Butterfly Conservation, and we're going to go through our live webinar, beginning with butterflies. Over to you, Rachael.
Thanks, Kieran. Hello, everybody. It's so great to see so many numbers attending. Thanks for coming along today. It looks like most of you have worked through a good bit of the course, which I'm really pleased to hear, because this webinar presentation is not about going through the ID. That's the course content, the online content. This is more of a sort of additional webinar presentation to help you sort of further your interest. And now that you've learned all these fantastic ID skills, what are you going to do with them and how can you help? So where do most people see their first butterflies? Well, I think for many of us, it's in our local parks and gardens, or your allotment or your community green space. And the kinds of species that we normally see in our gardens are peacocks, small tortoiseshells, painted ladies, and the red admirals. And those are what we call the sort of generalist species. So those species have the ability to travel, so they don't mind moving. And they also have a food plant which is widely available, such as nettle. And so they don't need to be located specifically in a particular habitat. So there are generalist species, and those are the kind of species we're likely to see when we're out and about going for a walk or we're in the garden. Now, you'll have been learning on the course that some species have some habitat preferences, and that tends to go with their food plant or the sort of conditions that they like. So say, for example, the speckled wood, it feeds on grasses, it likes to be near hedgerows and trees, that aids its camouflage, it likes to be a bit cooler. So you'll find the speckled wood in the kind of habitats that support it. But, you know, if you're out and about along a river path, you're very likely to come across those as well, anywhere where there's trees and hedgerows. And then we have our holly blue. And the holly blue's food plant is holly and ivy. So you will get the holly blue in areas where these trees can be found. And one of the reasons that we have holly blues in urban areas, it's one of the only blues that we have in urban areas, is because we've got mature trees in gardens and parks. And, you know, ivy can be widely found in gardens and parks in urban areas. So we can find holly blue quite easily. We've got a question for you actually, Kieran. It's a good time to introduce our question. So aside from appearance, you've been learning about appearance. So aside from appearance, what other information can you use to determine if a blue butterfly is a holly blue?
Okay, so we've got a few options there. There's the presence of holly or ivy in the habitat, the time of year, and then there's two options for behavior. One is flying close to the ground, one is flying high around the trees. So yeah, it's select all of the ones that are relevant. So you can choose more than one. You can choose them all if you want. Right, we're seeing good numbers coming in. I'm just going to give you a couple more seconds to answer that. And then I'm going to share the results, and then I'm going to read out what the results are so that that appears in the recording as well. Okay, right, time's up. So Rachael, you can tell us what's right in a second, but we've got 77% of people have selected presence of holly or ivy in a habitat, 61% time of year, 28% behavior flying close to the ground, and 39% flying high around the trees. So would you like to let us know what the correct answer
Sure.
is?
Yeah, so presence of holly and ivy in habitat, there doesn't have to be holly and ivy there because they might be travelling through an area, but they will be congregating around areas where they can lay their eggs on the correct food plant. So that absolutely is an ID help. The time of year, yes, they're an early spring species. So if you're seeing blue butterflies in early spring, it's very, very likely to be the holly blue. So that's a really helpful one for identifying a blue butterfly in your gardens or in your local woods that time of year. Behavior. So yes, people are not entirely sure about this one. So because the holly blue is a species that likes to use trees and ivy, which obviously grows very tall, it tends to fly high up. And the common blue is a grassland species, and it lays its eggs on bird's foot trefoil, which is much lower ground, down on the ground in the grassland. So they tend to use sort of those, have that split in the behavior. Holly blue higher up in the trees and common blue lower down. But of course, they can both move around, and sometimes you get holly blues coming down to drink water or rest on the ground as well, have a little bask on a nice path. So not entirely wrong in terms of their behavior, but it is for helping with ID. Okay, Kieran, ready to go on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so now on to the, that we're getting more specialist in terms of our preference here with the butterflies. So the common blue, it likes bird's foot trefoil as its preferred food plant. And that is a plant that you tend to find in species-rich meadows, on dune slacks, and also on waste ground. So it's a wildflower that likes poor nutrient. So you're going to find this wildflower in places where there's very little nutrient. So dunes, meadows, waste grounds are fantastic places to find the common blue. So it won't be in the middle of a city because you'll tend not to get these unless it's on a brownfield site. So actually you'll not get them in your garden unless you're growing bird's foot trefoil in the garden. So that's really helpful. And those to help you identify the butterfly by knowing the habitat. And these butterflies are getting a little bit more specialist. So you won't just see them as commonly, and you probably have to travel to a place to see them. And now we're getting very much more specialist and looking at the green hair streak. So the green hair streak likes moorland, heath, bogs, that kind of habitat. And in the north, its preferred food plant is bilberry, and that's an acid-loving plant, and it grows on peat. So you're going to find it only in those areas. It can't be in the garden. It won't, you won't find it down at the beach in the dunes as you would with the common blue. It has other food plants that it likes, such as blackthorn and bramble, but these are kind of plants that are features of these landscapes, and it also likes those bright green leaves of the hawthorn and birch, the young leaves, so it can camouflage itself. So we're getting a little bit more specialist here. It's not quite as specialist as some of the other butterflies that we haven't studied, such as marsh fritillary, which can only live on one food plant, so it's really specialist, but we're getting into that realm. So another question for you here, which is about one of the species that you've studied. So Kieran, if you're ready for me there, please. So which other butterfly from the training prefers heath and moorland? So you've got 4 to choose from there, and only one of them is correct.
So the choices that we've given are orange tip, brimstone, Scotch Argus, and painted lady. And as Rachel mentioned, it's just a single choice this time. I can see the numbers are coming in. We've got a clear leader so far, which we can see, Rachel, but the rest of them can't. It doesn't matter if you get this wrong. We're aware that people haven't been through the content yet. And it's good for us to see what kind of things stick with you when in the content as well. So I'll just give you a couple more seconds to fill that in. If you're not sure, hazard a guess. We can't see who said what, so don't worry. Nobody's going to be shamed by a wrong answer or anything like that. I'm going to end the poll there, and I'm just going to read through the results for you, Rachel, and then we'll go to what answers. So 8% have went for orange tip, so that's definitely not our leader. 17%, so a few more people think it might be a brimstone. A whopping 72% think it's a Scotch Argus. So I'm hoping that's right, because that means we've done it right. And then just 3% thought a painted lady. So do you want to talk us through the correct answer?
Yeah. So the Scotch Argus is the one that prefers moorland. It's an upland species, and it's limited in its range to Scotland and just to one site in northern England. So it really prefers those cooler environments, upland species where its food plant is readily available. So well done, everybody, Scotch Argus. And just, Kieran, I just want to make a note on getting things wrong, because I think this is really important for people who are trying new stuff to understand. It really doesn't matter if you get things wrong. Getting things wrong is the fastest way to learning it right the next time. And I know, because I made plenty of mistakes. So no, it's all about just having a try And you really do remember the ones that you've got wrong, and you learn that very quickly. So getting things wrong is good. Okay, next. Oh, there we are. There's our Scotch Argos there, the answer to our question. Okay, so how do you get closer to them? So we know where to go to look for butterflies, and some of this, we've had a look at some of the general habitats where we can go, and some of the specialist habitats there that we can visit. But how do we get closer to them? So there's two main ways that you can sort of capture butterflies, if you like. So you can use nets. Okay, now there's a little shorty net here. That's really convenient. You can scrunch it up and you can pop it in your bag. Or there's a longer net. And personally, I find the short ones are only helpful if the butterfly is sitting on a plant and you can get quite close to it. If you're chasing a butterfly across a field, then you want to use one of the longer nets. But you might not want to use a net at all, and we'll come to that in a minute. So some species are really difficult to identify, and we've not really covered them in this course. It's probably a course down the line. But you might need to net them and have a look at them to be able to identify them properly. And so you can do that in a net, but once you've netted them, you need to get them into a sample pot, and I'll come to that in a minute. But if you're netting a butterfly, you do a big figure-of-8 sweep, and then you pop it into a sample pot as soon as possible. The short net is only really good if it's settled. And in my opinion, I think if it's settled, you can grab a quick photograph on your phone. You don't need to net it. So that's nets for you. So the sample pot, you need a nice wide one for butterflies. And you don't want to have a battle to get it in there because you're going to damage it. Oh, I've forgotten something. I need to go back to collecting specimens in a second. I'll talk about this first of all. So you get your specimen in the pot and have a quick look at it, identify it as best you can. And if you think that you're not getting it just from looking at it close up in the pot, then take a photograph, okay, with the butterfly in the pot. Don't take the butterfly home and don't leave it languishing in the sun while you make up your mind and flick through the guidebook. So snap a photograph of it there and then and let it go. So how do we do this safely? And how do we do this ethically? There's only 2 butterfly species in the UK that you need to test genetically to separate them, and that's the wood white and the cryptic wood white. If you're a beginner, you don't need to collect and remove a live specimen for ID purposes. It's all manageable in the field, and it's manageable through photographs. So we don't support the collection of live specimens for identification purposes or for adding to collections. So that's not part of the butterfly conservation philosophy. We do sort of support the use of some live specimens to be kept for science and research purposes, but this is very stringently monitored, and it's not something that we would support across the board. This is usually when we're working with partners on a specific project. So if you want to know more about that, I think Dan's going to pop our live specimens policy into the chat now. When you're netting or handling a butterfly, try and avoid touching the wings. They're very delicate, they're made up of scales, and they're very easily damaged. So net them, get them into the specimen pot as carefully as you can, and then take your butterfly, take your photograph or try to ID. So if it's flowing up into your nets, you hold it up like this, your net's up because they're flying up there towards the top, and you get your pot and just turn your pot upside down and it'll fly up again and get your lid. So there shouldn't be any sort of wrangling with butterflies required. Use dry containers. Don't let them be damp or moist because that's going to damage them. And catch and release one at a time so you don't have butterflies languishing in the heat, flapping about trying to get out. Release as soon as possible. Don't try to trap a butterfly with a specimen pot. I've seen people try to do that when I've run training events. They've got the specimen pot and they're running up to a plant and trying to clamp a butterfly in it, and it doesn't turn out well. So you always use your net, and never net or try to collect mating pairs. We just want to let them get on with their breeding as much as possible. I prefer taking photos. That's my preference. I don't want to be tramping across the countryside with a net, so I like to take photos. And my advice for taking a photograph is be quick and get as many shots as you can, as soon as you can. Butterflies are really difficult to photograph unless they're basking, you know, and you've got a nice shot to line up. But if you want to get one for ID purposes, you need to do that quickly. So if I see a butterfly and it's a way off, even though it's far away and I think there's no chance that anyone could ever see that, I start snapping straight away. And then you edge forward or zoom in and just get more and more and more photos. Because if you try to set up a good shot straight away and it flew off, you've missed it. So you can get some rubbish shots and hopefully get a better shot towards the end, but you still have enough to ID your species. So there's lots of resources out there to help you identify your species. There's lots of really beautiful guidebooks, and there's also lots of online resources. So here we have one of Butterfly Conservation's ID sheets. There's quite a lot of those available online, different habitats and different kinds of sheets for species. So you can access those. I think Dan's going to share you a link. And there's also lots of really cheap, not cheaply made, cheap to buy resources such as the FSC guide here to butterflies. You know, for just over £3, you can have an excellent resource. So you don't need to spend a lot of money on a guidebook if you're just beginning. There's also lots of support locally. So Butterfly Conservation has lots of sort of branches that are run by volunteers across the UK, and they're always really keen to welcome new people in. And they all have a website through a webpage through Butterfly Conservation where you can contact them and find out about their events. A lot of our regions have their own Facebook pages, and a lot of the branches have their own Facebook pages. And also a lot of the branches are very active and have their own websites and list their events and things that are happening. And they're usually very, very welcoming to new people and happy to help with ID and get you going on your butterfly journey, because they're very interested in supporting new people to identify and record butterflies. And there's loads of online resources as well. So there's UK Butterflies, which is an excellent resource, and masses of Facebook pages where the sort of the primary exercise for some of these pages is identifying and sharing, you know, good butterfly sightings and your news. So that's a great way to get involved with taking your photographs and sharing them and finding out more. So once you've got your ID and you're developing all of that expertise, what do you do with all of that information? So it's nice to share it on Facebook and, you know, get some nice feedback and keep learning new skills, but we can really use your records. Your records can be of an enormous help to science and research and conservation. My functions are not working. There we go. And so if you submit your records, you'll be making a huge contribution to research, conservation and science. So what is a record, first of all? Well, a record is the what, which is the species. So what is it we're looking at? It's the who. And if you're the recorder, that's you. If you put something on a Facebook page and you ask for ID help or submit something to a website and ask someone to help you, they're the determiner, because they're the person who said, this is what this record is. So you need to add them in as well. That's like a bit of butterfly courtesy. You add in the day you saw it, so the when, and you add in the where. So that's the grid reference and the location. Now I'll put location in red, excuse me, because this is a common mistake for beginners, because you're all excited and you've seen something in your local area. And for location, you'll write my patch or my garden or mum's house or at the allotment. And what county recorders will come to in a minute, who look at the records, what they need is they need an actual location, so a place name, and then they can match that with a grid reference. So please always use a local place name when you're adding in location. There's loads of places where you can submit your records. You can go on to our Butterflies for the New Millennium site for butterfly conservation. Dan, or actually, I think these are in your course. These links are in your course. There's iRecord, where you can record all kinds of different animals and plants, not just butterflies, but you can add your butterfly records there as well. There's the I Record Butterflies app. And Dan, I'm throwing this one out because I forgot to mention it before. There's a bit of a YouTube video showing you how that can be used. And that's quite helpful. And so Dan might be able to find that and pop that in at some stage before the end of the webinar. And we've had a bit of an update as well to the Butterflies app, and that it's going to do photo recognition. So that's really helpful. And it's also got species online, so that helps you as well. And then we've got our surveys like Big Butterfly Count. You know, I'm sure most of you have, well, a lot of you have joined in with that over the summer. So that's a citizen science project. But one that I really want to sell to you today is the Garden Butterfly Survey. So this is a survey I've been working on through my project to give it a bit of a revamp and make the website more accessible. And it's a really nice survey, and you don't have to have a garden to be able to join in. So if you've got an allotment, or you have a community garden, or you have a shared garden, or even a balcony or a doorstep of pots with suitable plants in for butterflies, you can join in this survey. And it's really nice. You set up an account. You've got all of the species up there. So you've got sort of ID help there by reference photos. And then you can see what other people are doing in their gardens across the UK. And it's really nice to see we've got these interesting sort of results infographics that are dynamic. So you can see the changing sort of leaders on the board and see where who is seeing what across the UK. And then you can also have your own reports as well about your garden and your sightings. So that's a really nice new opportunity that we have available for you. And I think Dan is sharing the link for that as well. So you've learnt your ID, you've gone out and looked for butterflies, you've submitted some records. What happens to them then? Well, we have our network of county recorders, and these are people who receive all of your records, and they make a decision about whether the record is right or not. So they look at all the information in the record and make a decision. They're local experts. They don't get paid to do it. They are very much involved in encouraging recording. They'll give you feedback if you've submitted a wrong record. They collect data from all over. So there's all these schemes bringing in data and contributing all of these records in different formats. And we have these single human beings at the end who are trying to manage all of this data. So if you can give the very best record you can, as much information, give it a good place name, at least a 6-figure grid reference, some nice clear photos if you can, that really helps them. So they verify the records and they get sent off back to us for the butterflies for the new millennium. So what happens then to all of the records? Oh yeah, they okay your record. Keep them happy because they okay your record. Once we've got all of the records, we do some data analysis, and we do a lot of trends and distributions, and we also do a lot of publications and conservation and research, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. But firstly, I just wanted to make a reference to one of our very important monitoring schemes. This is probably not suitable for you if you're a beginner, but it's something to aim for in the future. So our UK BMS scheme, the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, it does long-term monitoring of butterfly abundance in what we call transect. So it's that it's the same site, the same walk that volunteers do every year. And the purpose of this monitoring scheme is to assess changes over time and over sort of space, if you like. So we're looking at what's happening where and what's happening over time. So that's a very important data collection exercise for us, and that is all carried out by volunteers. So that's something for you to aim towards in the future. So when we've got all of these records, when we've got all of this data, how does it help? Well, what we do is we do a lot of research, and that gives us evidence. And then we know how to carry out conservation. And we also know what advice to give to other people, sort of statutory bodies, local councils, or our NGO partners, people who run national parks. So it's giving that information, is evidence-based practice. That's what your records give, is research that allows evidence-based practice. So why do we do it? We need that evidence-based practice. We can't just make up what we think is happening when we look out and see butterflies. So you might think, oh, I don't see such a thing anymore, but we need to know, oh, okay, well, is that the truth? Are we not really seeing them? We need to find out the facts. So all of our monitoring schemes and all the records that you submit tell us what's happening, and you'll recognize that map from your training. It's a distribution map. And this one is showing change over time. This is the pearl bordered fritillary, and the pale blue dots are from 1970 to 2009. And the red tone, yellow tone ones are from 2010 to 2014. And you can see that this species is in trouble. It's no longer found in the places where it was found previously. And it's people's records that give us that information. And they also allow us to assess change over time in populations or abundance. And that you can see from 1976, there's been a downward trend in this species. So without people's records, we just wouldn't be able to know this stuff. And then when we've gathered them all, we put them into publications. So we put them into atlases. So atlases are basically what is where. Okay, so that's what they show us. And we also use it to advise and direct our conservation actions. So these are some of the examples of the things that we've been working on recently. And I think Dan's going to pop a link in so you can see more of our conservation work and how that's been informed by our research. We use the data to produce very significant publications, such as the State of UK Butterflies. We do one of these every 5 years or so. We've got one in the pipeline, a revised one. And these really inform the government and people who matter, who make decisions about what's happening. It's very important publications. So in the latest one, 2017, 70% of species were found to be declining in distribution. So that is in terms of their spread. They were actually shrinking in their spread across the UK, and 57 are declining in their abundance. So that's their population. So 57% of them, their populations have shrunk since 1976. And we also do masses of research. Butterfly conservation is very leading in terms of its research into invertebrate science. And it's used widely as well across the science research sector. If you want to know more about our publications and how our data has been involved in our publications, been used in our publications, Dan is going to pop in a link to our science pages and you can find out more there. And I think that submitting a record is a really important collective conservation action. I think it can all feel a bit gloomy for us at times, and you can think, what can I do? I can't help, I'm really busy at work and I can't go out, can't do a rally, or I can't get involved in volunteering. If you can submit a few records, you are becoming part of one of the biggest collective conservation actions that we have. It's a powerful movement to inform research so that we can better protect butterflies in the future. So submit a record and feel part of the movement. And if you do have a little bit of time to do a bit more, you can have a look at Butterfly Conservation's volunteering pages. These are being constantly developed at the moment because this is sort of a big piece of work that we're delivering at the moment, is to provide more volunteering opportunities. So please to check into that as well. And I'm very happy for anyone to send me any questions or ask if you want to get involved with butterfly conservation further. So that is my usual presentation, a bit of a motor mouth, trying to deliver a lot in a short space of time. But you can get me here at rconway@butterflyconservation.org. Very happy to receive any queries about anything. You can ask me anything. And I look forward to your emails. And thanks very much for taking the first step on this course. Okay, Kieran, that's me.